So, Naaz Noor, thanks a lot for coming today here and being a part of Digital Disruptors. We are happy to have you here. And today we're going to talk about startups. Yeah, a lot of people are talking about that. Entrepreneurship is in the air and stuff like that. Yeah,
it's like a trend now.
It's like a trend. Yeah, it's a very catching trend. So you have been deep in that space. So we've been friends for a while. So for all those listeners who don't know you, give us a quick introduction. How long have you been in this region? What inspires you? Stuff like that.
Okay. That's a tough part of the interview where you have to introduce yourself. But I'm by professionally a lawyer, born and brought up in Dubai. I think the only time I ever left Dubai was to do a law degree in New York. And fast forward, back in Dubai, worked with the private banking for about a good 10 years before deciding that I wanted to follow the trend of entrepreneurship. So we started with the first legal advice firm, and then it just literally grew from there to F&B consulting, organically into a co-work, incubator, digital and marketing agency, and we're sort of evolving as and where the market really takes us. So we're quite active in listening to the market trend and pretty much evolving from there. And it's been a very interesting 10 years from where we started and where we are today. And when you actually think about it in a blink of an eye, the whole ecosystem changed. We were incorporating 10 years ago about 4 to 5 companies. And now, though there has been a slight dip, it's still about 30 companies a month. So that just kind of tells you, where we started and what we've come and where we are. It's a very interesting place and time to be in at the moment.
Brilliant. And in 10 years, you've got a chance to be part of probably 70 plus startups. You've invested in some, you run some by yourself, you have an incubation center, you have a co-working space, you're doing a lot of good things for entrepreneurs out there.
Yeah, I'm pretty much creating a recipe for not sleeping. And that's exactly what's happening at the moment.
Yeah, so I think a lot of people relate to this. Yeah, they have an idea. They want to do a startup. They want to be their own boss, and the different reasons why they have to do that. So for somebody who's on the fence and looking to jump into entrepreneurship, do something on their own, give us some practical advice. It's been 10 years and 70 plus endeavors. So what have you learned? Something that they can take away and get things started.
Sure. Firstly, don't do it.
Okay.
It is a very tough environment. It is, a lot of times people tend to forget the hardship that goes into entrepreneurship. Those are, when you're working with somebody, it's very easy to switch on and switch off. But when you are running your own show, it almost becomes impossible. You kind of feel like guilt, you're constantly running. And it's a human nature. It does tend to have a toll on you. So unless you are prepared to sort of venture into something that intense, look other way. But if you do have still the appetite of actually venturing into the risk, the sleepless night, the competition, all of that, yeah, by all means get in. But I think before people get in, I think it's important to sort of take a step back and look at the market in a different angle. Let's look at the situation where we are today. It's evolved to a point now startups are getting acquired. So let's look at examples where recent acquirement was Careem. Before that was Souk.com. Entertainer was getting acquired. But it's very interesting to actually see these companies. When you actually look at it really closely, you see they're pretty much copy-paste models. There's not much of innovation in that. It is something that's been working, and they've pretty much taken that technology for the region, enhanced it, or whatever they've done to it, and pretty much got sold out, which is a great short-term thought process. When you actually go a little bit backwards, there was the same thing happening with the F&B world. You had, previously we were bringing a lot of franchises. Then came to a point where just falafel happened, and then everybody then decided to have
your own label,
exactly, and started building cafes, restaurants, and so forth, which is the market at the moment. which is great, but unfortunately what we're really lacking is innovation. There is not much of real deal from my point of view, because it's great and it's dangerous at the same time. No one's really looking into creating something because of mere fact of lack of information. And when I say lack of information, I mean there's so much unclarity within the ecosystem that we're in. Although we know that, you know, companies are coming in, there's VCs coming in from US to acquire it, but it's very important to see what they're really acquiring. They're not really acquiring a cafe, but we're producing so many of these coffee shops. We're producing so many of restaurants at the moment. I think we should sit down and start questioning that. Is this the right investment for me? And if it's the right investment, should I be expecting a VC coming and acquiring me? And keep in mind, if you're copy pasting, there's a lot of other copy paste in a bigger economy. You know, why would a VC come and acquire you specifically, being a very smaller market? So I think these are the kind of questions one needs to think about before entering into this ecosystem with the high expectation, not really realizing that there is a market, but a market is not a copy-paste market. There's a huge gap which is still not looked into, which is the innovation part. And there are reasons behind why this innovation doesn't happen. We can go into the depth of it, but I think it's important to sort of take that notion that copy paste will last for a certain period in time, but it will not sort of sustain our economy to that further level.
No, it makes sense because, but if you actually look at what's been happening so far, all the big numbers that have been acquired, Kareem being acquired, Souk being acquired, stuff like that. It's always been the copy-paste model, something that's already worked in another economy. They've taken to a market, they've probably Arabized it and stuff like that. They've given it a different brand, and an international company comes in and takes over to get that market share, so that they don't have other competitions. It has been working so far. So you're telling me that it'll stop working?
I'll tell you why it will stop. Our world is forever changing because of technology. Let's take artificial intelligence, for example. It's growing in such a fast pace that it's bound to grow such a fast. It's actually faster than the industrial economy, which came through. It's going faster than people predicted. Having said that, we also know for a fact that the superpowers like China and US are taking the lead, and they're taking it so far that it will be a matter of time where, you know, our jobs that we know are going to change. And, you know, positions like paralegals, accountants, these are just going to be a past memory of a job. When we know that this huge wave is coming, we're copy pasting, where there's a huger, you know, opportunity just lying there. When you think about it, the whole pretty much the whole algorithm is done. You just need to find industries to sort of, you know, utilize them. It's there, but no one's really tapping into. Why? Because we're just, you know, an economy where for some reason we don't look outside the box. When you actually peep out, there's a tsunami of change happening, and no one's really tapping into. So when I say that copy paste is going to last a really short period in time, eventually would, because by the time that change happens, we're far behind. So again, the urge is to sort of look into what's happening outside our economy, look into not just the success stories, but those micro, tiny things that are growing in such a large pace. Look at those, because those are the ones. I mean, just look at Uber, for example. Uber is one of the largest valued company in the world. However, 75% of their income goes to the drivers. And pretty soon, in a couple of years from today, those drivers are going to be replaced by artificial intelligence powered drivers. So imagine just that change, well, you can't imagine the value of that company. So when you start thinking about these changes, why are we producing more coffee shops? Why are we going into copy-paste applications which are already saturated? When you look at it, there's delivery app every second day. You know, why are we spending so much resource and time on things that have already been done with the hope and notion that someone's going to acquire me? The margin is very low. So, I mean, that's why when I'm urging, or when I constantly talk about, it's like there's so much more opportunity. And I understand that, you know, people are looking for a really short-term kick. It is not cheap to live in this part of the world. You know, when you talk about surviving, you're always thinking about, you know, what is the quickest way for me to make money? And unfortunately, what we see is what we perceive. We see that Souk has been bought. You know, we see Tom and Serge is the best restaurant at the moment. We see what we see, but there's no lack of other information in the market, you know, as an entrepreneur.
No, I think you've hit a right nerve, because there are a couple of things. You've already talked about how expensive the place is for a startup to thrive and work on innovation, number one. Number two, the education. It's very, very, very recent that universities are actually, and our academia is moving and working with industries to do innovation. Yeah, so grants and stuff like that are much lesser. The other economics, like economies like China, they innovated because of desperation.
Oh yeah.
Because international big forces like your Google, YouTube, Facebook was banned, because of which it gave opportunity for people like China to innovate and think outside the box, like you said. Yeah, because there's already a big market. And this is exactly what happened with, for example, the car industry in India. Because cars were not, when a car has to be imported, there's a 300 to 200% tax, because of which the industry, you know, it really boomed. So these are a couple of reasons. Fourthly, there are economics like Israel, where they really work on innovation. Like 10 years back, there were only probably 4 or 5 big name companies having offices in Israel. Now you have 50 plus. Your top companies in the US have their, not they just offices, they have their research centers in Israel.
Yeah.
So having all this said, we have a transit population, we have a consumer economy rather than a production economy.
Yeah.
Our forces are not helping us, because as Ubrik, we started as an innovative product. It was basically an ad network 10 years back. Yeah. What is Google AdWords today, or Google AdSense today? We went out of business the moment Google launched here, because we had 50 odd websites, we brought them together, you can have one dashboard, you can buy all of them. It was an innovation. But the pace at what we can innovate, because of there's no restriction, it's a free economy in a lot of cases. Yeah. And within probably a year, the whole budget started going to Google. So I think there are a lot of factors, and probably because of that is why we find cafes coming up, we find copy-paste models coming up, because this is short success.
Yeah.
Worst case scenario, because of how people like their food to be looked today, like on Instagram and stuff like that, and people like sharing and stuff like that, good looking cafes really work. Yeah. And
it's a very interesting intake. My perspective is completely different. My perspective is your decisions depend on what you know. And because there's a lack of knowledge within the industry here, or within the ecosystem, we keep on repeating the same mistake.
I totally agree.
So let's say, for example, it took me 10 years to realize that certain things are not meant to be done the way they're supposed to be done, right? And guaranteed that the person after me will probably take another couple of years to realize that certain things are not meant to be there. But I just wish if we had a center data system or center knowledge system, which could actually say, hey, this is what I did to be able to achieve this. It took me 10 years for me to be able to achieve this. Here's a copy of that, right? We don't do that in this market. We literally are holding on to information that really doesn't do much to you, but it does a lot to the industry that you're in or the economy that you're in. So what really happens is we're repeating the same mistake again and again. Had this copy been available, people would have looked at it and said, I'm not doing that. I'm actually skipping that 10 year and getting to the point whereby the experience and the innovation on that problem will surpass that 10 years. No one is doing that. And let's say, for example, other than that, no one's providing information. Even if they do provide information, there's not a center place where these data are gathered to provide new policies and procedures. No one's looking into them because it's literally fluid. What you experience, I experience are the same thing, but we don't know. And we're never going to have that discussion. So there's no center point to say, by the way, over-exaggerated restaurants. By the way, over-exaggerated copy-paste. There's nothing. And because it's not there, our thought process revolves around the same methodology. Had we given, for sure, a document that says, do these things because these are already done, do something else, the chances are our thought process will change. Our thought process of saying things like, I don't want to create a restaurant, but I know for a fact that there's this new thing that no one's tapped into, which is an actual problem that the market is facing. Let me solve that rather than building another cafe or restaurant. But because that lacks, or that lack of fluidity of information or access to that data or access to that information, we're literally running around in a circle constantly. And it's a fact. I wish that we could create, and this is an opportunity, create a center where you could sort of take all that knowledge, put it in one, give it access to people to look through, and then get them solving problems. And from that problems, there is implementation, then monitoring and further development. And we're going to enhance as a ecosystem. But because that information lacks, and no one's exchanging that. Here's a great example. We have zones for every possible thing, right? We have zone for internet, we have zone for media, we have zone for carpets, we have
textiles, everything.
Everything. But imagine if these zones got to know each other, met each other. Imagine the kind of innovation that would come through. This industry saying we're lacking in this industry saying we can provide you. We don't have to go outside. It's just here. But because there's a huge disconnection of information, data, connectivity, we're just literally together but still isolated, if that's making any sense.
Yeah, I mean, technology's enabled it. I think the red tape is not.
And to be honest with you, it's not just among us, it's also the policymakers. I just wish we could actually gather all those mishaps that we're having through these startups, capture it and deliver it, saying, guys, you guys are doing an excellent job, but these are real life problems. These are actual problems that need to be resolved for us to sort of, take that leap to the next level. But because that's not happening, because there's no interconnection, we're producing more cafes. We're producing more copy paste. And then I just, we're aware of this because of the circumstances that we're in with the startups. So we're consciously taking information and creating data and flooding the market for free. Just take that information, learn from it, and tell us what you're going to do with it so that we know what you've learned and that we can share it with somebody else. And same thing when we went to the authorities by saying, co-working space is great, but it's still table and chair. What can we do to sort of enable, as a service provider? What can we do? One of the issues is setting up a company here is very expensive. Just the idea of a one-man show getting a lease for 60,000 dirham minimum just depletes the whole notion of a startup. And it took us all this period in time to get to a point where they said, okay, there's a sustainability license now where you can just pay literally 4 to 5 or 10,000 depending where the location is.
And be legal, yeah?
Yeah, and be legal. And this is because of the interaction with the authority. Someone going and saying, here's a problem, please solve it, because what we have here is incredible thirst for entrepreneurship. You know, these guys are gladiators. They will do anything to sort of be able to achieve it. Provide them the right sort of intel information, innovation by default will happen because they get to see the problem, and by default they will provide solutions for it. But in lack of that, like I said, we're just going around in circles.
And people have probably listened to this to get some advice to have the startup, and people who are there at the edge of the seat now actually have gone back. Okay. now there's a bigger problem to be solved there.
I think here's an opportunity.
Okay.
Because here's one app for you. Why don't you create a database between zones and create a pool of resources and see the magic? You know,
there you go.
There is so much opportunity
There's
within.
Too much free advice, yeah.
It's free. Take it and run with it, because no one's doing that. No one is sitting and looking at the opportunity. We're literally copy pasting, and it burns me to my soul when someone comes and said, "Hey, can you help me with another application like Kareem?" I probably might stab that person.
So there's already too much of data. There's knowledge, but this knowledge is not being acted upon. That's what you're trying to say.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
I mean, there is knowledge. There is too much knowledge, but it's not centralized. So no one can actually, what knowledge you get from wherever you get it is different from the knowledge that I get. And sometimes that knowledge is not accurate. Sometimes that knowledge is too detailed for the person to get it. It's getting to the wrong ears. But imagine if you had, and here's another opportunity, create all the research, put it in one place, and take that research and hand it over to the authority saying, buddy, here is what we need to do to evolve. That's another opportunity.
Great. I think a couple of interesting ways to look at the same problem, yeah, and definitely I hope people listening to this would act on this. And
I really hope so.
Yeah. Now that somebody's doing something innovative, yeah, imagine somebody's doing something innovative. They're doing something, for example, to disrupt the logistics space, not an Uber, but something else, yeah, say for the shipping industry and things like that, yeah, and they've done a prototype. Now there's only so much that they can do by themselves, by bootstrapping. The next thing is getting some funding, making sure that you add more teams, you add customer service so that things are all right, stuff like that. So they would look at funding outside. So there are different types of funding, which is called angel investing, your friends and family, and venture capital. How can people go about it? Somebody has already now made up the mind, they've bootstrapped, they've started something. What's your advice? How can they structure this and try, making the pie bigger?
Sure. I think it's important to understand that there are different people interested at different stage of a startup life. When you're actually creating a prototype, you need to sort of not just have a prototype. We're talking technology per se at the moment. You should not just have a prototype that actually is functional. You should sort of have some sort of interaction or response from a client. Traction. And like I said, the investors have become quite savvy at the moment, and there are quite knowledgeable investors coming into the market now compared to investors that would say, I'm taking a bigger risk, I'm taking 60% of your company. Now even the entrepreneurs are quite aware that, hey, if it's a seed capital, I'm only going to give you 5%. Maximum 10%, because I am just not aware of what is happening, or I'm lacking that knowledge. And 5%, and then once you've actually got your seed capital, use that money to sort of show the capability of this app, which can capture that market. Then you can obviously go into the A seed, B seed, and so forth. But there is a process to it, and now what I've noticed is that there's a huge blank space between a seed capital and A. But then there's where you can sort of look into alternatives like peer-to-peer investments, where I think Beehive is doing a fantastic job, where they actually provide you a debt instead of acquiring your shares, which you could probably use that cash, providing that you're following the right motion of, ensuring that there is no check returns, there is no, your financials are properly placed in. They provide about 2 million dirhams if you are past 2 years and are actually momentumly doing really well to acquire that CAAA cap A air class shares. And there are quite a lot in the market at the moment are looking at, especially us, we're trying to create a systematic methodology where you come as an entrepreneur, with a prototype, and then we sort of train you to sort of say, hey, from this point to this point, please do not do these. Because if you do this, then this will disappear. And if this disappears, then the chances are you're going to disappear because there's no other alternative. You know what I mean?
So you give them not a to-do list, a not to-do list. Okay.
Because Dubai's law is very unique. You're guilty till proven innocent. Where in the other part of the world, you're innocent till proven guilty. So number one, buddy, do not play around with the checks. Those are criminal, not civil. There's a proper criminal fact, and those are going to central bank, and central bank will provide a nice little list for investors or people or banks, and that does not look good. It could have been your clientele who are supposed to pay you. It could be so many reasons which are out of your control, but checks are something that you have to be really careful with.
And this is where your legal advice comes into place, yeah?
And I think also it's very important to sort of understand certain things which are currently in the market. For example, we have a lot of activities in UAE which will require you to have a DED-based company, which is the mainland company. And the problem with the mainland companies are the restrictions where it clearly says that you need to have a 51% partner. And another obstacle is that if you by default are the manager of this company, but you're going to jail first, because by law, the manager takes the hit for any legal and I get a lot of entrepreneurs that say, hey, I have an LLC. Nope, you have an LLC, that's fantastic, good on you, a limited liability, but you've just by default kept the limited liability and overcompensated by putting yourself as a manager. And the moment you're a manager there, the law comes and says, whoever this manager is, shareholders don't take the hit, the manager does, and you've pointed yourself as a manager. So I find those quite like oxymoron kind of conversation.
You cannot get away with it. You have to have a manager, right?
You have to have a manager, but you need to be aware of the fact that, just because you've created an LLC and you got yourself as a manager, you need to be aware that any situation, you're guilty till proven innocent. You will be going into a certain, legal complication, being a shareholder. And if your business is running on you, you need to be aware of these things. You just can't assume that it's an LLC and God is great. You need to be aware of these legal, loopholes to be able to sort of, function properly, for example.
Oh, so I understand, but I think when people come from different parts of the world, where LLC is like a corporation, and the person behind is not, is liable to that. It's very different. Yeah, and it's more like proprietorship or something like that.
Yeah. So I think it's important to sort of understand as well that when you are creating companies, even in a free zone, please look at their legislation, because you will be shocked of the limitations that you have as a free zone. Let's give you a great example. Free zones are not meant to be working outside free zones, but it's a gray area. But then the government comes and says, oh, by the way, you have now a permit to actually operate outside the free zone. And then you're going and buying the permit, whereby all this time you were like, no, but the authority told us. And then you have free zones like Dubai Healthcare City. They have a specific code which says service code, which allows people to come into the free zone and they can service them. Some free zones say, hey, you can work in, but they don't have that, specific legislation. Sometimes when you ask for legislation, good luck. Do you know what I mean? So you have to be very careful on these pit holes, because there is no covering for ignorance. When things go bad, it will come bad on you. So you can't really say, I didn't know. You can't really say, I'm ignorant, so please forgive me for my action. There is no forgiveness. So it's important that when you're looking into entering such a tough environment where information is not there, where, policies are so rigorous, law is so hard on you, you need to be very careful when you do your homework. Go to the right set of people, do your homework, do your research. But then having said that, the positive note is, despite of this dark notion that we're in, there are some incredible winners. There are these incredible businesses that are making and killing it. And that shows you that, our entrepreneurs are ready. Just imagine if we give them those tools and the knowledge and information, the kind of stuff that we can produce.
No, I mean, it's interesting to look at it that way, because I think when there's barriers to a lot of these things, people find ways to go around it and and be successful, and we see a lot of examples over here. You've touched about the legal side of things while doing a startup and stuff like that. So what are the couple of pitfalls you've seen somebody who's doing, say, a technology startup or something which is very internet based, very digital based? What are a couple of pitfalls that you've seen, or what's the right way of doing stuff?
I think the biggest issue that comes in is, where do I set up? It's a digital technology company. What do I do? Do I just go into the free zone? Do I create an offshore entity? It's great. The law applies to every entity, be it technology or be it carrot salesperson, I don't know, like vegetable trading. The law applies. The moment you are moving from the cyber and you're exchanging service or product into mainland, you're by default entering into mainland. So you need to be very careful. The law clearly says mainland company deals with mainland and mainland company deals with external companies. There's no limitation, but there's a huge clear limitation in terms of free zone entering. And even if you're digital, you're living on the cyber, the moment someone uses their card to purchase your service, that's an exchange. That's a proper give and take exchange. And that falls into the legal framework where the transaction happened in the mainland. So you need to be aware of that. And that's the reason why you're looking at structures like, Souk.com has an offshore entity and then has a commercial broker in the mainland to be able to sort of, overcome those obstacles. Another thing that we tend to see quite a lot is, technology companies have assets. Let's say, for example, mainland company to sort of overcome, and then they have a free zone company that sort of overcomes the fact of owning the shares. How do you really structure that? Who holds what? And it's very important to say in a very simple language is, keep your assets
on the free zone.
On the free zone.
And liabilities on the mainland.
On the mainland. Because that's how you're going to protect your 51 odd. And keep in mind, the local equally takes the risk, for God forbid something happens, that he or she is equally liable for it. So it's important to not just think of your point of view. It's also important to see the person sitting on the other end who is actually taking that 51%, hit.
And not knowing what's really happening in the business.
Yeah, and it's happened. It has happened so often that, they've restricted certain license where they said only Emirati is 100% going to own it, like real estate companies. They cannot be owned by expats. They have to be 100% Emirati. Previously, our law firms were expat. Now they said your shareholder has to be there, Emirati, and he has to be a lawyer. Your accounting company has to be an accountant as a local partner, and he has to be an accountant, because they realize that people go into these transactions for financial gain and then get stuck and then say ignorantly, I don't know what that was. I don't know what I signed on. Nobody. Now you need to know, because you're in the same field, the same industry, and you're capable of understanding what's happening.
Makes
so
sense.
they've tightened quite a lot of things, but it's important to sort of, understand the legal genre behind what can be done and what cannot be done.
I mean, so I think as a Aseel group, I think this is areas that you expertise in. Yeah. So imagine I have an idea for a startup, and I come to you. You give me things to do and things not to do. What else do you guys actually offer in terms of support, in terms of knowledge, in terms of connecting themselves with the right people? Tell us what you guys do and what initiatives you have been doing, so that we can recommend you to people.
So our structure is very horizontal. What our point of focus is two things. One, provide as much as knowledge we can, because it lacks in the market, and two is to be able to sort of create this ecosystem where it's not just knowledge, it's an exchange of knowledge at the same time, where two entrepreneurs could meet and create this incredible synergy. And I was telling Nabil the other day, was like, we were testing this really interesting fact of how do we actually force these entrepreneurs to talk to each other, because you can easily sit on a co-working space with your laptop and just get into that notion of it. And so we have this rule now where when you become a member, you need to learn this hideous 4 dance move where the music plays and you have to get up and do it. And although it's like for a split, probably less than a minute, but something happens there, because you get up,
You loosen up, yeah?
you kind of go like, holy jazz, not again. And an eye contact happens. When that eye contact happens, there's a giggle, or there's like, oh, this is good. And once that eye contact happens, you automatically see the energy in that room enhance. And then you start seeing people having conversation, and synergies are happening, network is happening, conversations are happening. So we kind of like test and see, how people can meet together, how they can learn from each other, and how they can develop certain things in the way they can. And there's abundance of knowledge. Take as much as knowledge you can, and let's see what comes in. And I think it's our secret way of actually learning from that. It's like seeing in the environment that we're in, here's what you need to do. Let's watch you do it now, and see what's going to come out of it, and see how we can enhance it, and take that information and try it with somebody else and say, let's see what you can do with that. And just sort of evolve and develop within the ecosystem that we are. And I'm happy to share it with anybody else who wants to have access to it.
Brilliant. I think we'll keep some show notes that talks about your initiatives, and you do a lot of events that at your place. We've been a part of one. We've got an opportunity like that. Now I just wanted to widen the horizon a little bit. Like Dubai, UAE is a very good place to start. Yeah, there are a lot of internet-based businesses which the vendors are online, the suppliers are online, people who buy from them are online. They need a banking system to receive money and send money. Would Dubai, and there are other economies that are coming up, like UAE, you have Estonia, people looking at Singapore. Have you had experiences in these economies, and what would you advise people, so they don't have to be physically present? No, they kind of the
gig economy.
Yes, the gig economy.
So the most amazing thing about the gig economy is the fact that resources are shared, right? And I could be great in one thing and you could be great in one thing, and we're producing, which is magic, literally magic, which I think our market needs, because hiring as a business owner, resources are very expensive, and you get pinched properly if you got the wrong resource, because they're very costly affair to have to get them on board on their visa and cancellation and the whole notion of repeating, it's a lot of money. So in an economy where getting resources is so expensive, gig economy is magic. Now you don't really have to hire, you actually connect and disconnect depending on how good or bad their services are. So it's great. But the only problem here is that we're not getting the caliber of talent. And if we want to enhance the resource that we have, we need to have experts or, you know, guys from Silicon or guys from China or, you know, wherever this huge emphasis on technology to come down here. Digital nomad, it's a thing. People come, bring their laptop and sit and work on things, right? But they don't come here. They go to Thailand, Indonesia, yeah. And I have tried to bring them here. I create packages which is cheap as chips for them to come and work in our co-workplace. But they don't come because the cost of living is so expensive that they're like, no, I can actually, the money that I'm paying for 1 month, I'm staying 6 months next to a beach, lush green, you know, environment. I'm not coming here. And we're losing that opportunity. And we're actively now trying to find ways where we're creating packages 3 months, 6 months, and a year, where we're creating co-live with it, where we're creating instruments where, you know, people can come and share a space together where they can live and work together. And let's see what the magic comes in from there, because the cost is the key. And we're trying to fine tweak as much as we can. And we need that wave. We need that talent, we need that thought process, we need that
digital nomads to come in.
Yeah, we need that fresh meat to change things a little bit. So as much as we want to, the cost is killing us, but if we can actually find a way to that and get that floodgate coming in, it will be amazing for gig economy or the digital avenues that we're in.
Because as UAE, as Dubai, everything is in place cosmetically. Like they love to be here. But like you said, the costs do matter. Yeah. So 1 versus 6 months, it's a big deal. Yeah,
like you said, marketing has already been done. Everybody knows about us. They want to be part of us. They want to come and expand. But if we can just find that sweet spot in terms of pricing,
they can go work in Dubai, go back to Thailand, live there, and come back.
Probably. Let's see how it comes on.
Good stuff. I mean, have you also helped people actually incorporate in other parts of the world?
I think we worked with, we can actually incorporate a lot of other jurisdiction, but primarily offshores, because for us, offshore play a great risk mitigation process, where local companies don't have different asset class. So when you're a tech-based company, you need to be having, you know, option of class A shares, class B shares, and C, which doesn't happen in DED, for example, or free zone. So we use those entities to sort of create a hold co, which holds all the assets, and depending on what the technology is or what industry is, some free zones are great for funds, some great for technology, some great for confidentiality. So we kind of use offshores from different part of the world for structuring, but we can easily create entities in Panama, Delaware. These are pretty much, you know, fluid for tech.
No, the reason I'm asking you is when you bring in investment, and probably when you're at that particular size, this is important, because to move shares around, it's quite difficult in the legal system that we are working here. So yes, so that's the reason I was asking, you know, if somebody is looking at expanding and crawling through the floor.
That was amazing, by the way.
So he didn't want to be on the camera, and so
I think that was just probably the cream of the whole podcast. I just wish we could see what I just saw.
Yeah. So that's the reason I was asking you. So if
by the way, that's one of the reasons why I love these guys. It's like,
thank you. I think we are very DIY. Yeah. We started this as a small experiment, like you said. Yeah. And then now we're doing the second version of it because the first one turned out to be quite decent. Yeah, people are looking for more. So we thought, okay, let's do something with what we have. Yeah.
Cool.
So,
Yeah, and if there's anything that we can help and support you guys in, you know where to find me.
yes. So I think we had a good talk, and I hope people can take away inspiration out of this and steal some of your ideas, and also connect with you and your team, and explore the new things that you're doing. You're opening up really cool places, I guess. Yeah, in the Palm. This is what we were talking offline, and if people could.
Yeah, so there's so much happening, and I think another thing that we figured out was that let's break this, status quo. Let's do things crazy, and I'm sure you've been there. Like, we don't really have brick and wall. We have colors. We have music. We have pool.
You have artists.
We have artists. Yeah. We have, I don't know, flip flops. We've got like a lot going on, and I think there's where the heart and the pulse is. No one wants to be in a closed environment. Everyone wants to be able to open and talk and have conversation.
And the end is to add value. If you can actually add value to somebody else's life, make it a little bit better, and you have a real
absolutely
tangent. I mean, you have a business actually there.
Absolutely, yeah? Absolutely.
Perfect, Naaz. I think thanks a lot again for your time. We had a good conversation. Yeah.
I hope so.
Yes. And thank you.
Cheers. And it's a wrap.